Wrong one. All right, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That's where we're starting at for today. We're talking about chapter, I think it's chapter 9, lesson 1, short chapter. So we're at chapter 9, lesson 1, and lesson number 2. Take a couple days on that. So today, chapter 9, lesson 1. Talking about labor. Clearly talking about labor. How many of you watched the show that you see on the screen there, Dirty Jobs with Mike Rowe? Mike Rowe is an advocate for hard work and extra effort kind of guy. He'll do the kind of jobs that nobody else will want to do. Has a show on it on TLC, sorry, to the Discovery Channel. If you know anything about Mike Rowe is also a strong proponent of the Republican Party and one of those guys who's very much so not in favor of socialism. So let me start you with this question. I got a topic, I got a phrase, I got a word, I got a statement on the next slide here. It says, labor disgraces no man, but unfortunately you can't find men. You can find men who disgrace labor. If you're going to take a few seconds, maybe you can do a search on your computer. I'm not really all concerned with that, but just think about it for a second. Who stated this? Is it somebody in today's time, somebody from a long time ago, from the beginning of time? And maybe you'll be surprised. No, it's not Mr. During. It certainly is not Mr. During. He says other things. It's not Mr. Kerber. It's not Mr. Grasby. It's probably one of the most famous presidents of the United States, and also I think he's on a dollar bill. Not the dollar bill, but a $50 bill or something like that. Maybe 100. I don't know. I don't ever have that kind of money in my hands. Ulysses S. Grant. Labor disgraces no man, but unfortunately you can find men who disgrace labor. Basically stating simply, hard work is something that is very honorable. And there's those that work hard are easy to hire. Those that don't work hard, they disgrace the job and the effort that they put into their job. They're easy to be fired. Now, it's very easy to fire somebody who's lazy. I have no idea how many of you actually have a job. I assume at some point in time, I know Suntag works at Applebee's. We've had people at Lakeside work at Woodman's. We've had people that have worked at different restaurants and such. What determines how much money you are going to make? What determines your wage? And that's generally speaking what the price of labor is. And you can see right here, the price of labor is called the wage rate. And supply and demand will impact that market, the labor market. Because for as sure as there are buyers and sellers on the other end of the market, there has to be those that do the work. Those that are inside the factories, those that are inside the restaurants, those that are doing the behind the scenes work to make the product happen. And they get paid. They get paid a certain amount. And supply and demand greatly impact how much a person gets paid. Okay, so with wage, in the same way as supply and demand have a curve, there is also a demand curve for labor. And then there is the supply of labor. So we have to consider that as well. So the demand curve for labor, as you can see here, the demand curve for labor slopes downward. From top to bottom. I think on the next slide, let me take a look once. Yeah, we'll go through this, but I want to be able to address it with you here as we, with the cursor and such. So the demand for labor from top to bottom, left to right, goes down. The supply of labor goes bottom to top, left to right, and that's indicated here in blue. So the demand curve for labor slopes downward, while the wage rate will go, or the supply curve for labor goes upward. So as the number of workers decreases, the wage rate also decreases. So if you have fewer workers, the rate goes down. So I mean, I guess look at it this way. I could probably have you raise your hands, and I could probably have you say, or if I would say, how many of you would be willing to work for $20 an hour? I think everybody in the room, your hands would go up if I said, at $20 an hour right here, you'd be willing to get a job. That job, whatever it is. Maybe it is 20 bucks an hour. You'd love that. How many of you would probably go for $5 an hour, $3 an hour? I think my first job that I ever had was doing scorebook for baseball games, and I got paid $3 a game. Very few people are going to want that job, so the supply might be lower at $3 an hour as opposed to the supply of workers at $20 an hour. And that's not because of availability, that's because of sheer desire to get into that market. Who doesn't want to get paid 20 bucks an hour? As the demand for labor, this is just a metaphorical kind of a theorized kind of way of looking at it. If the demand for labor is high, like doctors, lawyers, brain surgeons, marketing executives, and the like, that wage is high. That wage is high because the demand is high. When the demand is low, then the wage is going to be low. So again, looking at it right here, the demand for labor, the demanded labor, those are the employers. I am demanding people working for me to fill my factory with workers to get stuff done. I am an employer. I am labor. I am demanding labor. The employees, the guy that's working, the average Joe that's slinging burgers or roofing houses or nailing their thumb to a wall, those guys are the supplied labor. They are the employees. So I'd ask you if you have any questions like normal, but I can't see you and you don't care, so we're just going to move on. So there's a transparency in a larger shape. Again, as we talked about it, the supply of labor, if the supply is low, you're going to see low wages. And that's not because of demand or anything. That's purely because who wants to work for $3 an hour? As opposed to up here, who wants to work for $20 an hour? Well, everybody and their mother would want to work for $20 an hour. So you can see what it says here. Number of workers able, willing and able. That's the key. Are you willing and able to work for this? There are a few people that are willing and able to work for peanuts. And they have more people that are willing up here. Demand for labor, the number of workers, employees are willing and able to hire at $10 an hour. Well, again, the demand is high, therefore the wage rate is high. That's that slide. Moving on. You have to establish an equilibrium wage rate, a point in which you are paying your employees a fair amount of a wage, yet balancing out between what it is you can afford to pay, the amount of people that can be hired, and you don't want to be left with a surplus or a shortage. So if you pay, if you got a really hard job that you're trying to fill, it's not like you're going to pay $3 an hour for a job that really should be paying $20 an hour, because nobody's going to want to apply for that. You got to find the proper wage at which point the supply for labor and the demand for labor meet again. That gives you your equilibrium wage rate right here. So the equilibrium wage rate is the wage at which quantity demanded of labor equals the quantity supplied of labor. Again, you have a job, you put it at its wage, its proper wage, and you should get the right amount of people that are going to apply to that job based on their skill level, based on their work ethic, based on a lot of things. These people are going to get to that job. They're going to want to be hired for that job. So when the quantity demanded of labor equals the quantity supplied of labor, that's your equilibrium wage rate. At a point in time, you're going to have issues. If the quantity of supplied labor, which would be those that are willing and able to work, when the quantity of supplied labor is greater than the quantity demanded, then there's a surplus of labor. You're going to have a lot more people that want a job, but you can't get a job. The wage rate falls. You'll have more people wanting to work in a spot than spots you have available. So you're going to end up it'll be on a chart in the next page. You're going to have a lot more people apply for the job than the wage rate is actually going to be able to fill. When the quantity demanded of labor is greater than the quantity supplied, then there's a shortage of labor. Quantity of demanded of labor is greater than the quantity supplied, then there is a shortage of labor and the wage rates rise. So greater demand usually means, not always means, a lower supply, but since there's a greater demand, you're probably going to have a higher wage rate. We'll go to the next slide so you can see that. So here you got a number of workers. This is your transparency from the previous slide. When you have a number of workers, like say for instance, that are being paid $7.75, let's just assume that that is the equilibrium wage rate, and your demand and your supply are perfect. This is an example of your equilibrium wage rate right there. $7.75 is the perfect, and that's how many guys you can hire. So looking at it this way, if you drop the minimum wage down to $7,000 or $7, then you're going to have an equilibrium wage rate that is going to be a lot higher of the amount that is listed in your minimum wage, your wage rate, your equilibrium wage rate. So here's the wage rate, but your equilibrium is still at $7.75. You're going to have a greater influx of workers and then create more of a I guess you could probably say it's going to be a shortage of workers because not many people are going to want to work for less money. And the same thing then here too, you got $9 an hour. That's higher than the equilibrium wage rate. And so now you get too many people that are applying for that job, and you're going to have a shortage of positions. Anyways, on that note, moving on. I guess one thing that always is true is why do some people make more money than others? And it all really, I mean, you got brain surgeons that are getting paid, $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 a year. You have engineers that are getting paid $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 a year. You got CEOs of major corporations that are getting paid a boatload. You got teachers that are making $40,000, $50,000, $60,000. You got administrators that are making $50,000, $60,000, $70,000. You got people at McDonald's, Burger King, Hardee's, Walmart. I mean, why do people get paid different amounts? And of course, the wage rate will be different because the supply of different laborers because the supply of different types of labor is not the same. So different jobs are different. Brain surgeon doesn't do the same thing as a garbage collector. A garbage collector doesn't do the same thing as a teacher. A teacher doesn't do the same thing as a construction worker. They're all different. So because they have a different type of labor, you're also going to have a different type of demand for the different types of labor. And that's also not going to be the same. So the higher levels of education that a person's going to need in a specific job will at times create a higher demand. A doctor,